And welcome back. If you recall from our previous lesson, when we had looked at this model with the current setup and camera lighting, when we actually went out to render this scene, it was actually very dark. We couldn't see a lot of features here, and you might have encountered some of that same within your own attempt. However, all is not lost. We only have tackled the camera so far. We haven't done anything yet with the light, which is what we're going to go ahead and look at next. So let's go ahead and get started by manipulating our light. So let's go ahead and just drop out of this view here. I'm just going to go ahead and press 0 to exit out. And I'm actually going to go ahead and let's go ahead and look at our top-down view here. So we can easily find our light source. And all I'm going to do with this light source now is I want to move this light source. I don't want it to be here. I want to go ahead and move it so that way it is no longer tied to this position. So maybe I want to put it kind of about roughly a 4 to 5 between the camera and the monkey here. And now when I do this, I also want to change my view here. So let's actually go back to kind of more of a regular view. I'm just going to toggle it over. And we've looked at the material preview before, but we didn't apply any materials here in this demo. Your shape will obviously have some materials, but if you look at this under the rendered view, it's going to take it a second. One thing you'll notice is that we are now starting to get some information here. All right, with our light source right here, we can see that there's a little bit more light illuminating on the face. Now, I know that this is definitely working because if I go ahead and select this and press G, as I start moving this light source around, you can see how the different shadows are now manipulating around this character. So already we're seeing some real-time rendering of lights and shadows here. And again, that's simply just from us manipulating this lamp. All right, and of course that's obviously going to affect our rendered scene. Now, if we go ahead and take this light here, and let's just go to our X view, one of the things that we will notice is if we grab this light source here, and we bring it down, we of course can see how those different lights are working. Let's go ahead and place this kind of right underneath our camera for now. And let's go ahead and see how that looks in camera view. And you can see how we get some different lights and shadows and stuff moving here. That's not bad. And again, we can play around with this light source here to try and really find it. But we're going to put maybe just a little bit closer to the camera just to see how that looks. And we still, of course, kind of have a little bit of a shadow here, which is fine. But we are, of course, losing some other features and dimensions. Now, this is simply just one light. A lot of times we actually may use multiple light sources to really help illuminate a scene properly. So let's just go up to our light real quick here and just rename this to our key light, because we want this to kind of be the main light, the main source of light that's illuminating the subject here. So let's go see if we can fill in some of these shadows. Again, remember we have this kind of weird shadow effect here. So we're going to go ahead and actually just exit out of this. And what we want to do is actually go to our top view this time. And what I want to do is take this key light here, and I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. And then once that's duplicated, I'm going to go ahead and shine that over here to the other side. So it's going to be roughly about the same distance here. So if we look at 1, 2, 3, so 1, 2, 3, and so this light will be about here, giving us kind of the same illumination from this side. So you want these to be about the same angle. And we're going to go ahead and rename this as the fill light, because it's helping fill in some of those shadows. And then we're going to go ahead and create one more light. So let's go ahead and duplicate that again. And we're going to actually put that behind here, because this is what's known as a backlight. And that's going to help eliminate out some of these kind of wandering shadows. Now this one's going to be roughly in line this one, but it might be a little bit different angle, because again, you want it to kind of be at its own spot. And we're going to call this the backlight. All right. Now when we go to our rendered scene, so let's go ahead and press numpad 0. You can see we have a lot of different things. We still have some shadow going on right here, but it's just simply because we have this cross of the forehead here. And we could adjust our lights around to try and eliminate some of this. But you can see how we have some of this detail here now. And that's all simply because we've added in multiple cameras. Remember before, this was all very dark, but now we have this nice subject line all illuminated. Now, one thing I want to point out is that with these different lights here, we have different things. So, for example, we can come in here and manipulate these different pieces with these different lights. So we have our backlight, for example. If I go ahead and I can temporarily hide that. But one of the things you'll notice if I go back to my render view, if I shut off that backlight, you can see how we're starting to see some of these different shadows get manipulated here. So you can see how those lights are affecting those different pieces here, just by kind of toggling them really easily. Now, all of our lights that we've done up to this point are what's known as point lights. And we go down here to our object data. You'll see under here it says light. So again, the little thing looks like a light bulb, and you see we have a light toggle. We have point, sun, spot, area. So for example, if I click on my fill light here, and I click on sun, you will see how that changes the different pieces here. All right. But for now, we're going to leave everything on point. The bigger thing we want to kind of play around is the power value. All right, you see this is right now 1,000 watts. So let's just go ahead and cut that down by half. Let's see, I cut that down to 500. And you can see how that will affect some of this. Because remember, when this is at 1,000, one of the trade-offs is that it washes out a lot of the details and shadows. But if I cut this down to 500 here, you can see that we get back some of that detail because the light is not as luminous. Same thing with my key light. If I take this down to, let's say, to 750, again, we're getting a couple of those shadows back, some of those details. All right, and that allows us to, again, manipulate this in different ways just from lighting. All right, now, our object, of course, is pretty good, and we have all these different things here. But one thing that we might want to do, and right now it's a very small scale in this demo, but if you start having lots of different components, having different collections can be really good. So I'm going to grab the backlight, the fill light, the key light, and the camera. I'm going to grab all 4 of those objects there. And what I want to actually do is take these 4 objects here, and I want to actually take them, and I want to move them into a collection. All right, so I'm just going to press move to collection, and then I can just create a new collection. And I might call this, for example, lighting setup. And that's going to include my camera in there. And then when I click OK, you'll see that it moved them out of the default collection into this lighting setup here. So it's just another way to kind of organize ourselves so that we were not having to search through a bunch of things. Again, we don't have much here right now. But later when we start creating different things, so for example, if you had a object with, let's say, a roof and a wall and a floor, you can have those collections be those different pieces, and it's just another way of organizing it so that way you're not having to comb through everything because you'll know a lot more where everything is. Now, the last thing that we might want to do is, in our scene here, is to dictate what's known as a parent here. So with this camera here, we can, of course, right-click and choose Parent. And then, of course, we have options here. So we can, for example, do all these different pieces here. But the thing that we want to do is we want to make it so that it's the parent to our 3 cameras. And what that's going to allow us to do is if we move one object, the other ones are going to kind of move in tandem with it. So it's a nice way for us to, for example, have that camera kind of move around the scene and keep that lighting the same. Now, that doesn't always work. For example, if you have a object that is scaled to a different size, you may have to repoint your cameras. But if you know, for example, this object is always going to be the size, then all you need to do is simply just to adjust this camera. So let's go ahead and parent this, and we want to make it a parent object. And we want to make it the parent of these, again, of these other objects. So I'm just going to go ahead and select all these little friends here. And you will see, oh, I accidentally parented the wrong thing there, so I've got Control Z because I think I had the wrong order selected here. You want to make sure that your active one is the camera. There we go. Then we should be able to parent that. And now you can see that the parent is this active one. And this is a good way to double check, make sure you set up your parenting correct. You should see the lines all coming back to the object that you want to be the parent. All right, and that's a nice, easy way to do this. And now the cool thing is, if I go ahead and use this parent here, I'm just going to press G to move around. You can see it will move, but then the cameras are going to kind of stay with it. So it's a nice, easy way for us to see how that changes, and it doesn't affect us having to readjust the various different components of that scene. All right, but that's going to kind of wrap up this here. Now let's go ahead and take the knowledge you know about using a basic 3-point camera setup and apply that to your own scenes.